A princess who begged for peace deserves exile, the High Chancellor declared, and the silence that followed hurt more than any sentence ever could. Every noble in the grand celestial court lowered their eyes. Not one voice rose in protest, not even the emperor's. Princess Serafina Vaylor stood alone beneath the towering crystal dome of the royal chamber, her silver ceremonial cloak trailing across the polished obsidian floor. She had spent her entire life believing the crown existed to protect its people. Today, it was using its power to destroy her future. Do you deny speaking against the Imperial Expansion Act? Chancellor Kashin Vorek asked, his voice smooth enough to sound reasonable, dangerous enough to leave no room for disagreement. Serafina lifted her chin. I asked how many innocent families would lose their homes if we invaded another star system. I would ask the same question again. A ripple of whispers spread through the chamber. Some sounded shocked, others amused. Vorek smiled as if she had handed him exactly what he wanted. Then you admit placing compassion above the security of the Empire? No, she answered calmly. I placed lives above ambition. The Emperor closed his eyes for a brief moment before speaking. His voice carried the weight of centuries, but none of the warmth Serafina remembered as a little girl. The council has reached its decision. Her heartbeat slowed. Somewhere deep inside, she already knew. Princess Serafina Vaylor is stripped of succession rights effective immediately. The words echoed through the hall like cold rain. Furthermore, Vorek continued, taking obvious pleasure in every syllable. To preserve political stability, Her Highness will enter a permanent diplomatic marriage with the Terran frontier settlement of Red Canyon. Gasps erupted across the chamber. One senator actually laughed before covering his mouth. Another whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. A Terran savage? They are sending royalty to marry one of those frontier humans. She would have been better off in prison. At least prison has dignity. Serafina stared at the imperial seal behind the throne. She had studied beneath that symbol since childhood. She had memorized every oath, every law, every promise that the Empire claimed to uphold. Somehow none of them mattered anymore. Who is this man? She asked quietly. Vorek tapped a small data tablet without bothering to hide his smirk. Nathan Brooks. Human. Resident of Earth. Former military service. Current occupation, ranch owner. More laughter rolled through the chamber. A ranch, someone scoffed. The Empire sends a princess to marry livestock. Another voice added. Perhaps the humans still settle disputes by throwing rocks. Serafina heard every insult, but what unsettled her most was the expression on Vorek's face. This had never been punishment alone. It had been planned. Every word, every reaction, every laugh. He wanted the galaxy to remember this day as the day House Vaylor fell into humiliation. The Emperor slowly stood from his throne. He looked older than she had ever seen him. The marriage vessel departs at sunrise. Their eyes met for only a second. He said nothing else. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. Royal guards stepped forward, not roughly, but with unmistakable finality. One carefully removed the jeweled crest from Serafina's shoulders. Another accepted the family signet ring she had worn since turning 18. Each piece felt lighter in their hands than it had on hers. As she turned toward the massive chamber doors, the nobles parted without speaking. Moments earlier they had called her Your Highness. Now they simply stepped aside as though she had already become a stranger. Behind her, Chancellor Vorek folded his hands behind his back and watched with quiet satisfaction. The exile had begun exactly as he intended. What he could not possibly know was that halfway across the galaxy, the so-called Terran savage had absolutely no idea a princess was on her way to change both of their lives forever. Nathan Brooks was repairing a weathered cedar fence when the sky split open with a low mechanical hum that did not belong anywhere near Red Canyon, Montana. He drove one last nail into the post, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked up as 3 silver ships drifted silently above his ranch, casting long shadows across the grazing horses. His old border collie, Duke, barked twice before retreating behind the porch. Nathan sighed. Well, this is new. The neighbors across the valley had already stepped outside, shielding their eyes from the afternoon sun. Children pointed at the ships while pickup trucks rolled onto the dirt road leading toward the ranch. Nobody panicked. Around Red Canyon, people had learned years ago that unusual things usually meant paperwork, not trouble. One shuttle descended with perfect precision, settling gently beside Nathan's old red barn without disturbing a single bale of hay. Its door opened, and 4 royal attendants stepped onto the ground wearing polished white ceremonial uniforms that looked completely out of place beside dusty boots and weathered fences. The tallest of them unfolded a glowing scroll and glanced around before locking eyes with Nathan. "Nathan Brooks?" the official asked. Nathan leaned his hammer against the fence. "Depends who is asking." The attendant blinked, clearly unprepared for the answer. "Are you Nathan Brooks, son of Daniel Brooks, resident of this property?" "That would be me." The official took a slow breath. "Congratulations. By decree of the Imperial Court, you have been selected to enter a diplomatic marriage with Princess Serafina Vaylor." Nathan stared at him for several seconds. Finally, he looked over his shoulder toward the empty pasture as though someone else might be standing there. "You sure you landed at the right ranch?" Another attendant checked the data screen twice. "Coordinates confirmed." Nathan chuckled under his breath. "I think your navigation system needs maintenance." The youngest official stepped forward. "This is a tremendous honor." Nathan scratched the back of his neck. "Friend, I fix fences, raise horses, and spend Saturday mornings buying tractor parts." "I think you have the wrong guy." Before anyone could answer, an elderly woman marched across the yard carrying a basket of fresh peaches. Martha Collins had lived next door for nearly 40 years and considered everyone under 60 to be a child. She looked at the royal delegation, then at Nathan. "Nathan, are these people bothering you?" Nathan smiled. "Apparently they came to tell me I am getting married." Martha frowned. "Did you agree to that?" One of the attendants cleared his throat. "The arrangement has already been finalized." Martha folded her arms. "That sounds like a terrible way to start a marriage." Nathan tried not to laugh. The officials exchanged confused looks, unable to tell whether the old woman was joking. A loud rumble suddenly echoed through the valley. Every horse lifted its head at once. Nathan's smile disappeared. He recognized the sound immediately. It was not thunder. It was engines. Fast ones. Another shuttle screamed over the mountains far too low, trailing black smoke before disappearing behind the western ridge. Seconds later, a sharp emergency tone echoed from the lead diplomatic vessel. One attendant pressed a hand against his communicator. The color drained from his face. "This cannot be possible," he whispered. Nathan took one step forward. "What happened?" The official swallowed hard. "An unauthorized Imperial assault craft has entered Earth airspace." The other attendants immediately formed a protective circle around their transport. "We were not followed," one insisted. "Our route was classified." Nathan looked toward the mountains where a thin column of smoke was rising into the blue Montana sky. His expression became completely still. Gone was the easygoing rancher who joked about tractors. Martha noticed it first. "Nathan?" she asked quietly. He never looked away from the horizon. "Get everyone inside," he said in a calm voice that sounded nothing like the man from a minute earlier. "Now." Nathan did not wait for another warning. He walked into the farmhouse, opened a narrow hallway closet, and pulled out an old steel case that looked as if it had not been touched in years. One of the royal attendants followed him inside, his eyes widening as Nathan entered a 6-digit code and quietly lifted the lid. There was no futuristic alien weapon inside, just neatly maintained emergency gear, a communications headset, binoculars, medical supplies, and a weathered service jacket folded with military precision. The attendant frowned. "You kept all of this?" Nathan smiled without looking up. "Some habits stay with you." Outside, Martha Collins was already ushering her grandchildren into the storm shelter beneath the house. "Move those feet, kids," she called with surprising authority. "Nobody stands around staring at spaceships today." The children obeyed without argument. Red Canyon had always trusted Martha. Nathan stepped back onto the porch and studied the distant smoke rising beyond the western ridge. Whatever had entered Earth's airspace was still several miles away, but it was not flying like a damaged transport. It was searching. One of the diplomatic officers approached him cautiously. "Mr. Brooks, our escort vessel can remove you immediately. We strongly recommend evacuation." Nathan shook his head. "Not yet. You may be the primary target." "That is exactly why I am staying." The officer looked genuinely confused. "You would remain here knowing they could come for you." Nathan glanced toward the barns where frightened horses shifted nervously inside their stalls. Because they would come for everyone else if I leave. The answer left the alien speechless. High above the ranch, the lead diplomatic shuttle projected a blue holographic display. A blinking signal traced the unauthorized craft weaving through nearby mountain passes. Its transponder is masked, another attendant reported. No Imperial vessel should be operating without identification. Nathan folded his arms. Then maybe it is not here on official business. Hundreds of light years away, Princess Seraphina sat silently inside the royal transport, carrying her toward Earth. She had not spoken since leaving the Imperial capital. The elegant cabin around her felt less like transportation and more like a beautifully decorated prison. Across from her sat Lady Morel, the only attendant who had volunteered to accompany the disgraced princess into exile. After several minutes, Morel finally broke the silence. "Would you like something to eat?" Seraphina gave a faint smile. "Do people usually have much of an appetite after losing everything?" Morel lowered her eyes. "No, Your Highness." Seraphina looked through the observation window as distant stars drifted past. "Please stop calling me that." Before Morel could respond, the cabin lights flickered once. Then again, a pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but noticeably tighter than before. "Attention! We have detected an unidentified vessel approaching our flight path. Please remain seated while we verify its intentions." Seraphina slowly looked toward the ceiling. Another coincidence. Morel did not answer. Back on Earth, Nathan adjusted the old communications headset over his ears. Static filled the silence until a familiar voice finally came through. "Brooks, this is Colonel Raymond Hayes. I had a feeling you would dust off that radio one day." Nathan allowed himself the smallest smile. "Good to hear your voice, Colonel. I wish the circumstances were better. We are tracking the same contact you are." Nathan watched the smoke growing thicker beyond the ridge. "Tell me something useful." There was a pause before Hayes answered. "Whoever is flying that ship is not trying to intercept the princess." Nathan's expression hardened. "Then who are they hunting?" The colonel took a slow breath. "Based on everything we are seeing through." Nathan lowered the radio and looked across the quiet valley. Nothing moved except the tall grass bending beneath the Montana wind. Yet every instinct he had built over years of military service told him the danger was already close. Colonel Raymond Hayes spoke again through the headset. "Brooks, local Air Force assets are 23 minutes out. Keep everyone sheltered and do not engage unless you have no choice." Nathan glanced toward Martha's storm shelter where the last of the children had disappeared below ground. 23 minutes is a long time. "I know." The transmission ended with a burst of static. Above the ranch, the royal escort ships shifted into a defensive formation. Blue energy barriers shimmered around their hulls as sensors searched every canyon and ridgeline. One of the alien officers hurried toward Nathan. "Our scanners have located the unidentified craft." "Where?" Nathan asked. The officer pointed toward a rocky mesa less than 2 miles away. It landed behind the ridge and deployed multiple life signs. Nathan quietly picked up the binoculars from the steel case and climbed onto an old wooden water tower beside the barn. From the top, he swept the horizon until faint movement caught his eye. Dark figures were spreading through the pine trees with disciplined precision. They were not charging recklessly. They were advancing slowly, using the terrain exactly as trained professionals would. Nathan counted under his breath. 1, 3, 6, no, 8. He lowered the binoculars. They know what they are doing. The lead attendant looked uneasy. Imperial Command insisted no hostile force survived our departure. Nathan climbed back down. Either command was wrong, or somebody wanted them to survive. Before anyone could answer, the peaceful afternoon shattered as every electronic device on the ranch flickered at once. The lights inside the farmhouse went dark. The windmill stopped turning. Even the escort ships overhead wavered for a split second. "Electromagnetic disruption," one attendant shouted. "Our sensors are temporarily blind." Nathan did not panic. "Everybody inside the barn. Keep low and stay away from the windows." "The barn?" the attendant asked in disbelief. "It is built with heavy timber and steel. Better than standing in an open field." The group hurried across the yard while Nathan remained behind for one final glance toward the tree line. A small metallic object rolled quietly out from the brush and stopped in the middle of the dirt road. It was no larger than a football. Instead of exploding, it projected a blinding curtain of white light that swallowed the entire entrance to the ranch. Visibility vanished almost instantly. Confused voices echoed through the haze. I cannot see anything. Stay together. Protect the transport. Nathan closed his eyes for 1 second, listening instead of looking. Boots. Careful footsteps. Different directions. Whoever had planned this understood that fear scattered people faster than force ever could. He reached the barn doors just as Duke began barking furiously from somewhere inside the fog. Nathan froze. The dog never barked without a reason. Then he heard another sound. A calm human voice speaking from beyond the white haze. Nathan Brooks. It was not loud. It did not need to be. We are not here for the princess. The stranger called. We are here because someone in your government has been lying to both of our worlds. Nathan slowly stepped away from the barn entrance, placing himself between the unseen speaker and everyone sheltering behind him. If you came to talk, he answered evenly, then step into the open. The voice replied without hesitation. I would, but the people hunting both of us have already arrived. The strange voice disappeared as suddenly as it had come. The white haze still drifted across the ranch, but the silence felt different now. It was no longer empty. It was waiting. Nathan raised one hand toward the barn without looking back. Nobody comes outside until I say so. Martha answered from behind the heavy wooden doors. You be careful out there. Nathan smiled faintly. Always. He slipped around the side of the barn, staying low behind stacked hay bales until he reached the edge of the property. The haze had begun to thin, revealing fresh boot prints leading toward a narrow creek that cut through the valley. Whoever had spoken knew how to move without leaving much behind, but not enough to fool someone who had spent years tracking people across rough ground. A voice crackled through the headset clipped beneath Nathan's collar. Brooks, this is Hayes. Our satellites just came back online. Tell me something good. I cannot. Nathan stopped walking. Go ahead. There are now 2 separate unauthorized groups inside your valley. They are moving independently. Nathan looked toward the distant tree line. That explains the voice. Not exactly, Hayes replied. One group is broadcasting stolen Imperial military codes. The other is using encrypted Terran frequencies that officially do not exist. Nathan frowned. Terran. That is why I called. Somebody on our side knows they are there. Before Nathan could answer, movement caught his eye. A lone figure slowly stepped out from behind a cluster of pine trees with both hands raised. He wore dusty civilian clothing beneath a weathered field jacket, not armor. He looked human, somewhere in his late 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. Nathan Brooks? The man asked. Nathan did not lower his guard. Depends who wants to know. The stranger gave a weary smile. Still cautious. That has not changed. Nathan studied his face for several seconds before recognition finally settled in. David Mercer? The older man nodded once. 20 years earlier, Mercer had served as an intelligence analyst attached to Nathan's unit. Then he had disappeared without explanation after a classified operation overseas. Nathan had assumed he was dead. You vanished, Nathan said quietly. I was ordered to. Mercer glanced toward the hills before stepping closer. We do not have much time. Nathan folded his arms. Then start talking. Mercer took a deep breath. Your marriage was never about diplomacy. I figured that part out. Princess Serafina was selected because somebody needed both of you in the same place at the same time. Nathan's expression hardened. Why? Mercer hesitated. Because both governments have been hiding the same secret. Before he could continue, a bright streak crossed the afternoon sky. Everyone looked up as the royal transport carrying Serafina emerged from orbit far earlier than scheduled. Instead of heading toward the designated landing zone, warning lights flashed across its hull. The pilot's strained voice suddenly burst across every open emergency frequency. Mayday! Mayday! Our navigation controls have been compromised. We are unable to change course. Emergency landing unavoidable. Nathan stared as the transport descended far too quickly toward the western ridge. It clipped the tops of several pine trees before disappearing behind the hills. A dull impact echoed through the valley, followed by silence. Martha pushed open the barn door despite Nathan's earlier instructions. Was that the princess? She asked softly. Nathan never took his eyes off the rising column of dust in the distance. Mercer looked at him with quiet urgency. If she survives that landing, every faction in this valley will race to reach her first. Nathan picked up his old field pack without another word. Hayes returned over the headset. Brooks, federal rescue teams are still 18 minutes away. Nathan started walking toward the ridge. She does not have 18 minutes. The climb to the western ridge took less than 10 minutes, but it felt much longer as smoke drifted through the towering pines and the scent of scorched metal lingered in the cool mountain air. Nathan reached the top first, dropping behind a cluster of granite boulders overlooking the crash site. The royal transport rested at the bottom of a shallow ravine, tilted against a fallen pine tree. One engine was still glowing faintly, but there were no flames, only scattered debris spread across the hillside. David Mercer caught up beside him, breathing hard. That landing was controlled, he whispered. Nathan kept watching through his binoculars. Barely. Several royal attendants were already helping survivors away from the damaged transport. Then Nathan spotted her. Princess Seraphina stepped through the open hatch without assistance. Her ceremonial cloak was gone, replaced by a simple gray travel jacket. Yet there was something unmistakably regal in the way she carried herself. She paused only long enough to help an older attendant regain his footing before surveying the unfamiliar Montana Valley. "She is alive," Mercer said quietly. Nathan nodded once, but his attention shifted to the surrounding woods. "They are already here." Small flashes of reflected sunlight flickered between the trees. Optical lenses. Somebody else was watching the crash from multiple directions. Nathan touched the communicator in his ear. "Hayes, we have eyes on the princess." "Understood," the colonel replied. "New intelligence just arrived. Listen carefully. Lord Cashin Vorek has issued a galaxy-wide emergency bulletin claiming Princess Seraphina has been kidnapped by a dangerous former Terran military operative." Nathan almost laughed. "Let me guess. That operative is me." "Officially, yes." Mercer closed his eyes in frustration. "He moved faster than I expected." Nathan lowered the binoculars. "He is rewriting the story before anyone can see the truth." At that very moment, Seraphina accepted a handheld communicator from one of her surviving attendants. A polished image of Chancellor Cashin Vorek appeared above the device. His expression radiated calm concern. "Your Highness," he said warmly, "thank the stars you survived. We have confirmed that Nathan Brooks orchestrated the attack on your transport. His objective is to force the marriage and use you against the Empire. You must avoid him at all costs." Seraphina stared silently at the projection. "Nathan Brooks. He is highly trained, extremely manipulative, and considered one of Earth's most dangerous veterans. Rescue forces are already searching the valley. Stay where you are. Trust no human except those traveling with official Imperial authorization." The transmission ended. Seraphina lowered the communicator slowly. Lady Morrell stepped closer. "Do you believe him?" Seraphina looked toward the distant mountains. "I do not know what to believe anymore." Up on the ridge, Nathan had seen enough to understand exactly what had happened. "He reached her before I ever could," he said. Mercer nodded grimly. "That was always the plan. If she fears you, she will never listen." Before either man could move, the quiet valley echoed with the deep roar of approaching engines. 3 sleek black aircraft swept low across the treetops before circling above the ravine. They carried no Imperial markings and no Earth insignia. Just a single silver emblem Nathan had not seen in years. His face became completely still. Mercer noticed immediately. "You recognize them?" Nathan answered without taking his eyes off the aircraft. "I hoped they had been shut down a long time ago." One aircraft opened a secure broadcast on every emergency channel. A calm female voice filled the valley. "Attention all parties. By authority of Project Sentinel, Princess Seraphina Vaylor and Nathan Brooks are now designated strategic assets. Recovery teams are authorized to secure both individuals by any necessary lawful means. Resistance is expected." Mercer looked at Nathan in disbelief. "Project Sentinel still exists?" Nathan watched as dark figures began descending from the aircraft toward the crash site. Apparently somebody never stopped the mission. They only changed who the targets were. The black aircraft never fired a shot. They did not need to. Their arrival alone froze everyone in the ravine. The royal attendants instinctively gathered around Princess Seraphina, while the surviving escort officers activated what little defensive equipment remained after the crash. Nathan watched from the ridge, studying the descending figures through his binoculars. 6 operators touched down with mechanical precision, their dark uniforms carrying no national flag, no imperial crest, no Earth insignia. They looked like ghosts from a history everyone wanted to forget. David Mercer exhaled slowly. They recruited a new generation. Nathan lowered the binoculars. No, look closer. Mercer focused on the nearest operator, and his expression changed. Those are not recruits. Exactly. Nathan recognized the posture, the spacing, even the silent hand signals. These were veterans. People who had spent decades disappearing from official records. Colonel Hayes suddenly returned over the headset. Brooks, new information. We intercepted fragments of Sentinel communications. Go ahead. Their orders specifically forbid harming Princess Serafina. Nathan frowned. And me? Hayes hesitated. You are listed as optional if recovery becomes impossible. Nathan smiled without humor. That sounds about right. Down below, the Sentinel commander removed her helmet. She was a woman in her early 40s with calm gray eyes and a face that showed neither anger nor urgency. She took 3 slow steps toward Serafina and stopped at a respectful distance. Princess Valor, my name is Commander Julia Grant. We are here to escort you somewhere safe. Serafina did not move. Who authorized this mission? People who have been protecting your future longer than you realize. Lady Morell whispered nervously. She is human. Serafina answered without taking her eyes off Grant. So is the man they warned me about. Commander Grant nodded as though expecting the response. You were told Nathan Brooks attacked your transport. That is what Chancellor Vorek reported. Grant reached into her jacket and placed a small crystal data drive on a nearby rock before stepping backward. Then watch the flight recorder before you trust another word he says. No one touched it. Not yet. Above the valley, one of the black aircraft suddenly banked sharply. Warning alarms echoed from its cockpit as an unidentified energy pulse streaked across the sky from beyond the mountains. The aircraft lost altitude instantly, struggling to stabilize before disappearing behind the eastern ridge. A second pulse followed only seconds later. Every person in the valley looked toward the horizon. Even Commander Grant turned. Nathan's eyes narrowed. That is not Sentinel. Mercer quietly shook his head. No, somebody else just entered the game. Hayes spoke again, faster this time. Brooks, long-range radar confirms another fleet crossing into local airspace. Their transponders match Imperial Royal Guard signatures. Nathan almost laughed at the irony. Vorek sent his own rescue team after already blaming me. Not exactly, Hayes replied. These ships did not launch from Imperial headquarters. They launched from Vorek's private military carrier. Mercer stared at Nathan. He is bypassing the Emperor. Nathan nodded once. Which means he no longer cares who notices. Across the ravine, Serafina finally picked up the crystal drive. If I view this, she asked Commander Grant, what will I find? Grant answered without hesitation. The truth about your crash. The truth about Nathan Brooks. And the reason Chancellor Vorek needed both of you alive until today. Before Serafina could respond, the crystal drive activated by itself. A holographic recording appeared above her hands. Instead of showing the transport, it displayed a classified Imperial meeting held only 48 hours earlier. Chancellor Kashin Vorek stood beside a star map and spoke words that made every person watching fall completely silent. Once Princess Serafina and Nathan Brooks are together, Phase 2 may begin. Neither of them must learn why their families were connected 30 years ago. The holographic recording froze on Chancellor Kashin Vorek's face, but the silence that followed carried far more weight than his words. Princess Serafina stared at the image as though the ground beneath her had disappeared. Play the rest, she said quietly. The recording resumed. Vorek turned toward someone standing outside the camera's view. The bloodlines must remain separated until the activation sequence is complete. If either of them discovers the archive before the ceremony, 30 years of preparation will be lost. The recording ended abruptly. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Lady Morell looked at Serafina with confusion. What archive? Commander Julia Grant answered before anyone else could. That is exactly what Vorek has spent 3 decades hiding. Nathan finally stepped out from the ridge with both hands visible. Every royal guard immediately raised their weapons, but Serafina lifted one hand. Wait. Her eyes remained fixed on Nathan. This was the man she had been warned to fear. Yet he had stayed hidden while others argued. He had never once tried to approach her by force. Nathan stopped nearly 30 feet away. You probably have 100 questions. Serafina answered honestly. I am no longer sure which questions matter. Nathan nodded slowly. That makes two of us. Commander Grant reached into her field pack and removed an old metal case with faded military markings. She placed it on a flat rock between Nathan and Serafina, deliberately leaving equal distance from both. This belonged to Dr. Eleanor Brooks. Nathan's expression changed immediately. My mother. Grant nodded. She asked us to protect it if anything ever happened to her. Nathan stared at the case. He had not heard his mother's name connected to classified operations since the day of her funeral. She was never in the military. Grant looked directly at him. Officially, no. Mercer stepped closer. Nathan, your mother was one of the lead scientists assigned to the Human Imperial Cultural Exchange Project before it was shut down. Nathan slowly shook his head. She designed agricultural systems. That was her public job, Mercer replied. Privately, she worked with Princess Serafina's mother. Serafina's breathing caught. My mother died when I was 6. Grant looked at her with genuine sympathy. She did not die in an accident. She discovered what Chancellor Vorek was building. The valley seemed to grow impossibly quiet. Even the distant aircraft had disappeared behind the mountains. Nathan knelt beside the metal case and carefully entered a date instead of a password. His mother's birthday. The locks clicked open. Inside rested old photographs, handwritten journals, and a crystal storage key unlike anything either Earth or the Empire currently manufactured. Nathan picked up one faded photograph. It showed 2 women standing together in front of a greenhouse, laughing beneath a bright blue sky. One was unmistakably his mother. The other wore simple clothes instead of royal robes, but Serafina recognized her instantly. My mother, she whispered. Nathan turned the picture over. Written across the back in careful handwriting were just 2 sentences. If our children ever meet, tell them we chose hope instead of fear. They must finish what we could not. Serafina felt her entire understanding of the past collapse at once. The marriage had never been random. The exile had never been punishment alone. Someone had spent decades making sure 2 families would never discover they had once been friends. Before anyone could speak again, Colonel Hayes interrupted through Nathan's headset. Brooks, listen carefully. Satellite confirmation just arrived. Vorek's flagship entered Earth's orbit 5 minutes ago. Nathan looked toward the sky. He came himself. Hayes answered with quiet certainty. Yes, and according to intercepted transmissions, he is no longer coming to recover the princess. He is coming to destroy every piece of evidence inside that case before either of you reaches the archive. The wind carried the scent of pine across the valley as Nathan and Serafina stood side by side with the old metal case resting between them. High above, Chancellor Kashin Vorek's flagship broke through the clouds, its massive silhouette darkening the afternoon sky. It was meant to be a show of overwhelming power, the kind that usually ended arguments before they began. Instead, nobody moved. Nathan simply looked at Colonel Hayes' latest transmission on his communicator and handed it to Commander Julia Grant. Send everything, he said. Grant nodded once. Already done. At that exact moment, every civilian communication network on Earth, every Imperial public channel, and every Galactic Council archive received the same encrypted package. The flight recorder from Serafina's transport. The recording of Vorek's secret meeting. The journals written by Eleanor Brooks and Queen Alina Vaylor. 30 years of hidden history spread across the galaxy in less than 10 seconds. A warning tone echoed from Vorek's flagship. Then another. Then dozens more. Across the Empire, senators, governors, military officers, and ordinary citizens watched the evidence with their own eyes. Nobody needed to be persuaded. They could hear Vorek's own voice. They could see his own face. They could read the promises 2 mothers had made long before fear and ambition tore them apart. Serafina looked toward the sky as a secure Imperial transmission opened on every remaining royal frequency. Her father appeared on the projection, no longer sitting upon the throne, but standing inside the emergency council chamber. He looked exhausted, older than she remembered, but his voice never wavered. Princess Serafina Vaylor, the charges against you are withdrawn immediately. Chancellor Kashin Vorek has been removed from all authority pending a full Imperial investigation. Around the valley, the black aircraft quietly changed course. The The private fleet that had answered only to Vorax slowly powered down its weapon systems one ship at a time. No battle followed. No glorious final duel. Just something much rarer. Thousands of people choosing to stop following a lie once they finally recognized it. Serafina lowered her eyes. It ended with the truth. Nathan smiled. That is usually harder than winning a fight. A few days later, reporters from every corner of known space crowded outside Nathan's ranch. They expected dramatic speeches, celebrations, and political announcements. Instead, they found Nathan repairing the same cedar fence he had been fixing before everything changed. One young reporter called out, "Mr. Brooks, history says you helped save 2 civilizations. What do you want in return?" Nathan drove another nail into the weathered post before answering. A quiet afternoon would be nice. Laughter spread through the crowd. Serafina stepped onto the porch carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. She had traded jeweled gowns for blue jeans and a simple plaid shirt borrowed from Martha Collins, who insisted every newcomer in Montana needed proper clothes before worrying about politics. Martha watched from her rocking chair with obvious satisfaction. "I told you that girl would fit in around here." Serafina handed Nathan a glass. "The Imperial Council wants me to return." Nathan looked at her without asking the question. She smiled, and for the first time it was not the careful smile of a princess trying to meet expectations. It belonged to someone finally making her own choice. "I will visit," she said. "But home is where I am free to become the person I choose to be." Nathan nodded. "That sounds like a good definition." Months later, the old greenhouse built by Eleanor Brooks and Queen Alina Vaylor was restored on the ranch. Human children and alien children planted trees together beneath the same Montana sky their mothers had once dreamed about. Near the entrance, a small wooden plaque carried a simple sentence copied from the back of the faded photograph. "Hope grows where fear is finally invited to leave." Visitors often asked whether the story was really about a princess, a rancher, or a conspiracy that lasted 30 years. Those who knew the whole truth always gave the same answer. It was about 2 people who refused to let someone else's fear decide who they were allowed to become. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can build is not an empire, not a fleet, and not even a legend. Sometimes it is simply a home where trust is stronger than pride, kindness outlives power, and tomorrow is no longer something to fear, but something worth sharing.